writing good and effective documentation. So if this is your first meetup, then a couple of things to take care of. We want to be friendly and welcoming, be respectful to everyone, and please be careful in the words that you choose. So a little bit about us. We've had 550 plus Write the Doc meetup members. We are available on Twitter at WriteTheDocs India, so WTD India. And we try and meet once in 2 months to kind of keep ourselves updated about what's happening and learn from each other. And you can get involved by joining the mailing list at writethedocs.org. Get to know our worldwide meetups. You can join our Slack group, or you can join the meetup group at meetup.com/WriteTheDocsIndia. Starting from this particular meetup, we are also available on hasgeek.com. And I'm just going to type the URL here for everybody. So hasgeek.com has agreed to host us and live stream our meetup on their portal. So you can find us here as well. All right, so in this meetup, our first talk is going to be given by Manasi Gandhi. But before I introduce Manasi, I want to introduce Raji. Raji, if you're on, please just say hi and introduce yourself as well, please.
Hi, I'm Raji. And Lubaina, thank you for being such a wonderful host. Thank you, Hasgeek, for hosting us. And that was a lovely introduction of Write the Docs India. To keep this community alive, Lubaina has been helping us organize events every 2 months. We have hosted events in some wonderful locations. We have discussed varied topics across accessibility, design thinking, UI, and it's been a great learning experience. If you do want to be a part of this community, Lubaina already listed out the forums where you could reach out to us and follow us. And if you would like to present something, please do reach out to us. We do have a Google form on our meetup page where you could fill in the details about the topic that you want to present. And we always encourage first-time presenters to talk their experiences so that we could learn from your experiences. Welcome to this community, and let's get learning.
Awesome. Thanks, Raji. So our first speaker today is Manasi Gandhi. And I want to introduce Manasi a little bit. We had some time to chat. So Manasi is, she's a technical writer at IBM. And she is right now talking to us from North Carolina, USA. Thank you, Manasi, for making it. And Manasi is, she's recently graduated, and she's got an MS in technical communication. She's really passionate about web accessibility, design thinking, and intercultural technical communication. For her capstone project, she worked on a curriculum model for technical communication in India. So welcome, Manasi, and over to you.
Thanks, Lubaina. Can you hear me? Okay, so let me share my screen first. I am going to present on design thinking for technical communication. Basically, it's a new concept, not very new, but I found it very interesting, and I loved applying it for technical communication. So what is design thinking? Design thinking is a process of human-centered problem solving. Here, the term human-centered is important. So when we create a product or when we write about a product, the user is the most important person from design thinking perspective, and not what the a product has to offer. And this is very helpful in this process is very helpful in finding out what the user wants and how we can cater to the needs of the user. There are 5 steps involved in design thinking. The first one is empathize. Empathize with the user. And how do you do that? You interview prospective users to explore user needs and pain points when you are in the product development phase. Next, you have to define, which is come up with a problem statement based on your interview and research. So the problem statement is your kind of a starting point. After you have your problem statement, which defines the needs and pain points of the user, the next step is ideate. In the ideate step, you come up with different ideas that solve the problem. So it you can have a variety of solutions. You don't have to stick to a single solution, and that gives you a huge range, and then you can narrow down and come up with what fits best. So when you are at that stage where you think you have a solution of what fits best, you come to the next step of prototyping. So when you analyze how your ideas fit with the user experience, you build a prototype, which is which is not exactly a product that can go to the market, but you have something that is working right now, and you can improve on it, but you at least have a working model. So basically, prototype is a working model. Next step is once you have the working model, you test your prototype with real users. Uh, you can reach out to your users. There are various ways of reaching out to your users. It depends on where you work and what resources you have, or you can come up with your own resources and reach out to the real users and find out if your product is working with them, and if there's anything more that needs to be added. And once if you think there's more, then you go back to the beginning of the cycle, start with empathize again, and it's kind of a loop. It goes on and on. You're continuously innovating, continuously creating, finding new ideas, and that's what is very interesting about the design thinking process. But why do we need design thinking? uh, Currently, it is the most sought after skill because employers need people who can solve problems. They don't want employees who depend on uh, their managers, or they don't want people who reach out to other people for their solutions. They want employees who can come up with their own solutions individually and as a team. So design thinking helps tackle complex problems, and sometimes it even helps you come up with new ideas. And the inward right now is disruption. So how do you disrupt the market? How do you come up with new ideas, new products, and help wherever you work, help your company to do better? But then why do we go for design thinking for technical writing? Because writing, how do you fit writing and product development? So as technical writers, we know how difficult it is to write about a product when it is already developed. In reality, technical writers should be involved in the writing process right from the beginning, that is when the product is being developed, and not when the product is ready. So So that's like, it's the agile process. I'm not going to go into that right now, but writing is a complex process. So as a technical writer, I personally think that we work on new concepts all the time, and we sometimes, I personally don't know where to begin. So I have this technical writer's block, and I'm sure many of you have the same. So the design thinking process helps in um, s- building your draft, and writing your concept in a manner that is accessible and helpful to the users. So when the user, whoever the user is, it could be a developer, it could be an operations person, or it could be from a different from a medical field, whoever is your user, the thinking process helps you in writing something that is what something the user would need to read. So how do you go about uh, with design thinking for technical writing? What steps do you need? So uh, it's the same steps that we discussed a few minutes back. First is empathize with the user by asking questions and finding pain points. How do you do that? If you know who your potential users are, so I write developer documentation. So I make sure before I start my draft, I go and speak to the developer. Most of the times I don't go outside. I just work with the developers where I work. But I go and talk to them. I interview them. I ask them, what is it that what is it that they are expecting from this tool? If it's a new tool, um, or if something that they have already used, they are very good at giving their inputs. So they will tell you what their pain points are, what would they like more, or how helpful it is. And based on that, you can come up with a clear, actionable problem statement before you begin brainstorming for a new topic. So that's your second step. So, so instead of just pulling out a sheet of paper and brainstorming on a concept, it is better to first go and talk to the user and come up with some points from the user perspective, and then start brainstorming for the topic on a piece of paper, or uh, on the computer, whichever works for you. Now when you brainstorm the ideas, that's the next step. So after the actionable problem statement, next thing you do is you brainstorm with your ideas. Once you have the ideas which can solve the problem, you can build a prototype draft of your topic. So most of the times, when we write a draft, it's never a final draft. It's a working draft at the beginning, and then so many changes take place. It goes through different editorial reviews, and it is like, it's when it's done, it seldom looks the same as when you started. So this gives you a working prototype draft of your topic, which is user centered. After you have your draft ready, you can go back to the user, for example, the developer, and ask him or her to read your draft and answer questions to check their understanding. So I mostly use Google Forms. They are a great way of doing surveys or research, and you can even generate nice graphs at the end of your surveys, which help you in your presentation. If you want to present to your team how you did a usability test of your content, it helps. So after you can get your draft tested, it is a very good step before you send your draft for the editorial review. I'm going to just discuss how I work, and you can work in a different manner. It's completely your choice. But this is what worked for me. I'm just going to give an example. This is a general example. I'm not using a technical example, something that anyone could understand. So, for example, if there's a social media app for seniors, and you have to write about it, how do you begin? So in the introduction, I use an inverted pyramid format with the what, why, when, who, and how. So what is this social media app? Who is it for? When was it launched? Why is it required? And how is it going to help? That that takes care of your introduction, and then you go into detail about what the different aspects of that app are. So for example, I'm just going to discuss one paragraph, but you can replicate this for your whole topic. If your concept has a topic has like 5 paragraphs, six, whatever, however long your document is. So who is your audience? That's the first question. In this case, the audience is, and this is a completely hypothetical app. It's so just to discuss what design thinking, how design thinking could help you write about it. So the audience here is senior citizens, and this app is going to help them connect with uh, their family who is probably not living with them, or even if their family is living with them, they want to connect to their friends or their extended family. It could be anything. There are different scenarios. So when I write my first paragraph, I always follow this rule of the 5 whys. So if in my first paragraph I'm talking about voice enablement, so for example, if this app has voice enablement, then why does it have a voice enablement? So you can because some seniors could have difficulty using their fingers when they use an app. uh, and the next why is why do they need the ease of use? So you know that some seniors, they could be reluctant in using technology, and it is important for the person who created the app to make it easy for them to use, so they don't have that barrier of using the technology. Uh, why easy? So when it is easy, it's like why is it easy, and how have you made it easy for them? So you have used AI powered voice recognition technology in it, so the senior person can just use the voice to start the app. They don't need to use their fingers, or even they maybe not even need to pick the phone up to start the conversation or start the app. Then one more, so that takes care of like 3 points already. So why AI? Then you can say that AI has a huge, whatever AI you are using, it has a huge database of languages, accents. So it is like a big data center where uh, which recognizes voice, which understands different accents all over the world, which understands different languages. And as I said, this is a completely hypothetical situation, but it could be a possibility in the future. And so why is this database needed? That's the next why. That's the fifth why. You can say because it gives a personalized experience to the seniors, and that is what a senior person would want. That, for example, even in case of my dad, he wants to walk to the bank instead of using online banking, because you need you like that personal touch, like that personal experience. So when creating an app for a senior person, you want that personalized experience. So here I'm just talking from the point of view of a technical writer or a technical communicator on how you can draft your content. And this is a concept topic. It's not a task topic or a reference topic. It's a concept topic. But you can, you know, use this for different types of topics according to your needs and requirements. But the 5I formula has really worked well with me, and I just wanted to share that with you. So I have a fun discussion question, and this is what I have used previously at my university. So I wanted to use it here because I used it in the US, so I wanted to use it in India as well, just to get your inputs. Um, the discussion question is, this is McDonald's in the US, and one of the best-selling items they have is the Big Mac. And this is a web page of the Big Mac, and they are promoting it in the US. How do you think you would promote it in India? Does anybody have any inputs?
Everybody, you should be able to unmute yourself. Yeah, if you're not, you can just type it in the chat. Or if you're
Yes,
shy.
sure. Hello.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear
You
you.
could probably start by advertising the price.
Yes, very good. That's a very that's the first thing that anybody wants to see. How is it priced?
And the word only, either either before or after the price.
Okay.
That seems to drive home the message.
Okay. Okay. Great. Anything else?
I also mention what that brown thing is made of. I mean, is it meat? Is it chick? I mean, like, what is it? Is it? I mean, because of the dietary preferences of Indians, not everybody eats everything.
Yes, you really nailed it. This is what I was, talking. That was what my intention was. So this is a Big Mac, and it's called a cheeseburger, but it has meat. And many in the US it's different, but in India, different people have different dietary requirements, and so it is not. When you absolutely cannot sell this in India. So when McDonald's came to India, they kind of changed their perspective, and they came up with um, everybody knows the Maharaja Mac and the veggie and the chicken patty burgers. But in the US, nobody knew about it, that we have these burgers in India, and how McDonald's designed it for the Indian, Indian dietary requirements. So this was the problem, and this is the solution. And I found it very interesting how things change. And because I'm highly interested in intercultural technical communication as well. So this is exactly how design thinking works. It's not what you have to offer. You might think you have something, your product is great, but what if the user cannot use it at all? So that's what design thinking is about. And I want to go one step further on how this is completely my personal experience. So when I visited India a couple of years back, we visit every year. This year we couldn't because of the corona thing, but I was visiting my sister in Pune, and I saw this right next to her home, this McDonald's, and it has these words written in Marathi, and Marathi being my mother tongue, it is the experience that you feel like you look at this McDonald's and you just want to go inside and eat. Why not? Many people, I mean, we eat at McDonald's in the US as well, but it's not necessary we go in McDonald's, we could go to some other place. But why looking at this McDonald's, why do I feel like going inside and eating? It's just that the wording, the language that is used, the script that is used makes me feel at home, and it kind of gives me a different experience, and that's why I want to go inside and eat. So that's what design thinking is all about. It's all about the user and the user's experience and the user's needs and the user's or whatever the user wants. And that's what makes it very interesting. And it's a very interesting process to use in technical communication. So I have this resource to share. I will put the link in the chat. It's an enterprise design thinking course by IBM. It's free. You can sign up. They'll ask you for an IBM ID, but anybody can get an IBM ID. You can create your own IBM ID and just sign up. And the course is free. You will get a badge, I think, and then you can share that badge on your LinkedIn profile as well, if you want to. And it's a good course. I did it and it was very helpful. Design thinking has many more concepts which need to be covered, but in this short period of time it is very difficult to touch upon all of them, so I didn't go into those details. But this course will cover them for you if you're interested. Questions? Does anybody have any questions?
Mansi, I don't really have a question, but I had an observation from that picture that you shared. I think I know in some states in India, it's a legal requirement to have the name of the establishment written in the script of the state. Like in Karnataka, a lot of places are required to have the business name in Kannada. So I think, yeah. So
yeah, that's interesting.
yes.
I mean, I have heard about it a little bit as well, but the thing is that in India, we live there and we see our mother tongue name used everywhere. So it's very common. But when we visit once a year, if we see something, it really touches our heart and we want to go and experience it. So from my point of view, it was really very a touching thing. It could be, as you say, it must be a legal requirement, but that probably it's not McDonald's that did it out of choice, but it's something that was legally required. But it was really touching, I can say. So.
I understand.
Hi, Mansi, Raji here. This is regarding the empathizing question that you had for designing a social app for senior citizens. So, what are the various aspects that you actually consider? I mean, I understand using the fingers on a screen that is hardly, hardly 12 inches. It is a challenge, we understand. But as you age, you get hard of hearing as well. So, how much of usability and how much of accessibility part do you consider when you empathize?
That's a very good question, and you can really broaden this as much as you want. So for example, someone with a rheumatoid arthritis might have problems using their fingers, but what if they are hard of hearing? So can there be something which, if there's a video, can you have something that has captions, or captions that are available in different languages, or you could come up with something that gives them the time zones of whichever country they want to talk. And so there are so many different possibilities. It was a completely hypothetical app, but That's a very good question, because it's not just hard of hearing or visibility problems or using fingers. But nowadays, a new concept in accessibility is neurodiversity. So what if a person is neurodiverse, that they get overwhelmed with a lot of things going on the screen, or that they cannot they don't like all those animations or emoticons or gifs running around on the screen, that might disturb them, and it happens with seniors. So how do you give them an option of turning off the animation or turning off the gifs if needed? Or how do you give your app the possibility of working with different assistive technologies which are out there in the market? For example, if they have some a pen or something that they can, it's like touch the screen, and it could help them select or press a button instead of with their fingers. Is it compatible with that technology? How is your app compatible with that technology? So there are different things that you can come up with during the brainstorming, and most of the times the product development is a team thing. But as a technical writer, we are on our own so many times. So just the thinking process itself is helpful in the writing process. The design thinking process is really helpful in your writing process. Or even if you're creating a different kind of content, like a video or an infographic, it could be anything. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I think, a lot of apps have to, anyways, they have to get it. They have to conform to the accessibility requirements.
Right.
I was also looking more in terms of the actual content that you will be writing, and a concept that even touches upon accessibility. How are there any examples that you've come across where a concept actually touches upon these aspects as well?
You mean accessibility?
Introducing a product,
Uh-huh.
the voice enablement that you mentioned,
Uh-huh.
actually even conceptualizing about even the accessibility part of it, not just the usability part of it.
So, as a technical writer, you can only write about what the product is about. But as you write your content, you can be careful while writing that your content is, can be read by a screen reader, that you're using proper headings, that you're using proper words. Because sometimes we use words like very often, especially in task topics, we use words like as above, or as shown below, or you can say as shown in the table below. We do that often, but we have to train ourselves to not use those words, because a screen reader might say above or below, but if somebody cannot understand what is above or what is below, or using colors or using names of colors, how would a person who is visually impaired, how would that person understand it? So when we write the content, we have to be careful of these different criteria.
Yeah, thank you, Mansi. Yes.
Hi, Mansi and Raji.
Hi.
This is Shankar. To add on to what Mansi said, so when it comes to accessibility, it is one of my fields of interest. So in certain companies like Oracle, they follow this accessibility guidelines when they create content. As Mansi was telling, for screens, colors, and the tables, graphics, there will be alt text. So when the screen reader picks up, it will read out the table contents as well, or give a summary, brief summary.
Yes.
And when we use any hardware like a mobile or any device, handheld device, there will be voice prompts as well, especially for senior citizens. So there is one mobile in the market. I forgot the name though. So it has big keypads, and whenever a key is pressed, a corresponding voice prompt will be heard. So that way, I think even it will be helpful for technical writers also. When we create content, we can also create content for voice prompts as well.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting.
Yep.
Okay, folks, I'm sorry, but any further questions, you can just post it on the chat group over here. And Mansi, if you're up for it, you can just answer it offline, as in like
Okay.
while the other talks are going on, if that's okay.
Okay, I'll stop sharing and I'll share my link, share the link of the course in the chat.
Oh, perfect.
Thanks, Mansi.
Thank you so much, Mansi, for this. This was really useful. Folks, Mansi is just going to be sharing. Mansi, I think you shared that with me privately. So
Okay.
yeah, we can just share that with everybody. All right, so do check the course out. And we'll move on to the next talk. So the next talk is about the H and 5 Ws of product documentation by Aditya. Aditya Sood is a business analyst at ThoughtWorks, and he's been driving feature development and innovation for the last 5.5 years there. As a creator and consumer of open source products, he is a very vocal evangelist for good product documentation. He's passionate about tech and open source and believes that good product documentation directly facilitates product adoption, which enables better product support. So over to you, Aditya.
Hey, thank you, Luvina. Hello, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. Start. Okay. So as Lubena introduced, the talk that I'm going to do today is going to help you understand how does the product documentation help facilitate product adoption, helps the various members on the team, where all can the members on this team utilize these product documentations. What are the factors that you should think about when you're starting off with your product documentation? Or if you already have something in place, or how can these questions help you to understand if it's actually solving the purpose for the various stakeholders who are going to read these documentations, who are going to maintain these documentations. And I'm hoping that by the end of this, some of these questions are something that you folks start asking when you're doing some of these exercises. And that probably leads you to a much enriched product documentation for your products. The first question is, how do you get started? You have a product, there's some technical documentation that are supposed to be written for that product. How do you go about, what are the steps that you probably take? Some of these questions can also be asked if you have already started on the journey of documenting your product, or already started on putting together some pieces of these documentations. It can also be useful if you go back and look at your product documentation and ask your team or ask yourself when you're doing it, where are these questions answered? How are these questions answered? One of the things that I did when I was a member of an open source product called GoCD. It's a CI/CD tool, and I've worked in various roles in this on the team. I started off as a product specialist, and when I I often had to interact with both the end customer, who's the adopter of our product, and work alongside our sales. So some of these questions were constantly being answered as we were developing our product documentation. So in the retrospect, when I thought about it and I put together these are some questions which I think are really vital. The first one being, why should you do product documentation? What are the benefits that it would yield a product team or an organization from doing a product documentation? Um, it would definitely go in as an enabler, as an enhancer for your end user experience. We've often seen teams or products investing on the UX side of the application, the look and feel of the documentation. Oh, sorry, your application. But if you're investing the time in actually doing a well detailed out product documentation, it acts as an enabler for onboarding new users. It acts as an enabler for easy facilitation or usage of your product. Answers a lot of how to's for your product. This even can be experienced from a new product that you and I would probably want to go and try, given that it's not it's not very easy to reach out to product teams or the support teams, and the lead time to getting your queries answered could be huge, and that might lead into a drop of a user, or might come as an hindrance in the adoption of that. So if your product documentation is written from or is written to answer some of these questions, then your it would enable an easier adoption. It acts as an enabler for your product support team. Often support teams on products are lean. They are quite occupied with a lot of how-to questions from users. This load can be shifted. This could probably be moved to some of more integral feature explanations for your tool, if the documentation is done. Enables easier onboarding for future product engineers. Why would we need that? This is always going to cut some bandwidth into your product teams. If anybody joining in your team has to get onboarded, has to understand what's already existing. So that's definitely a help. Answers how to generally any person coming on or any user coming on for your product has a lot of how-to questions. Your documentation can help answer that. Helps product sales teams. I've always got these questions from sales teams about certain feature of the product or the extent that the product can be used in certain areas. And these questions have come in, we've thought and we've added these into our product documentation, so that the next time if we have a sales query, or if the product sales team is probably sitting in an environment where they have end users or they have potential users, and there are conversations happening between them,
Is it just, or did
Yeah,
everyone?
no. I think, Aditya, we lost you. Hey, Aditya, we can't hear you. All right. So I think Aditya is facing some issues. He's logged off, but he should join us back in a minute.
got muted. All right. Yeah, I think I got muted there. Going back to who would benefit from your product documentation? Who are the various?
Aditya, we can't see your screen.
All right.
Yeah.
You can see it now, right? Yes. All right. So the next question that is often asked, that really helps you streamline the next set of activities that you would want to do for your product documentation is who are the stakeholders that I'm going to write these technical documentation for? What are the categories of users that I have that are going to be onboarded onto the application, or who would be the ones who would be using this application, and how can I design my product documentation to best answer the queries that would probably come. So broadly, I think these are the it is an end user whom you should definitely keep in mind. You should probably step into the shoes of an end user when you're thinking about writing a certain feature, and program or write your documentation in that manner. Potential users, given that there could be multiple competitors for your product in the market, and your potential user is going to be looking at the product with certain site, with certain usage. How do you answer these how do you answer those questions, and how does a potential user who comes to your application looks at those and is convinced or is probably keen to try out your product? That's one of the steps that you should do. Product support teams, this is more of an internal benefit that you reap out of a well-written product documentation. Product engineers, because as your product is going to grow, you're going to have people come in or you're going to have people leave. But a well-maintained product documentation, a written product documentation is the oldest living member that you can have on your product team. One know-how wiki for your product, a resource that can be leveraged by one and many that you can probably have. Product marketing teams, again, because it's a great marketing tool, it can be used. And can you think of someone else whom you think can be benefited from your product documentation, based on your product, based on the usage of your product? And if there are, as we say, create personas, if you may, then if you think of those personas that were created for your product, how can you answer some of the basic questions for these personas? Probably you would want to include those in when you're trying to write. Now that you've thought of why am I doing my product documentation, now that you know that these are the users that I'm going to do my product documentation for, when do you start? When do you think that this is the right time to probably invest? When does a product team think? And I think that if there is a day one for a product, then the product documentation should start at day zero. There is never a time when you should say that this should not go in your product documentation. Things can be churned out, documentation can become lean over a period of time as you work on it, as you grow. However, there are solid amount of ideas that are discussed within the team. There's some features which are dropped eventually, and might not even make it to your product documentation. But I think you should start on day zero. They should be as you probably start the first line of code, you should probably start the first line of your documentation as well. Most of us function, again, it's an assumption, but most of us usually function in agile teams, in smaller teams that work on a set period of releases, and there's a time frame for that work. I consider it as a strong anti-pattern to do your product documentation after the release. That just piles up the documentation, that does not get in the process that you used to actually reach to a certain feature. And sometimes, many a times, you would miss on writing what is included, and the whole comprehensive list is lost. So do it during your each release. Avoid piling it for the end release. And add product document, add the step of documenting a feature as part of a story, use it as one of the acceptance criterias, so that it's always tracked. You know that um, how do you want to, or you don't have to miss a certain things. Just like piece of code, your documentation would also go through set of iterations. It would go through set of churnings. It would go through set of adding new items. And as you would do this process, as you would iteratively build on this from day one, you would end up creating a more user friendly, a more stakeholder friendly documentation. um, is the idea. So I just wanted to give you certain examples on how we've done it on GoCD. GoCD is an open source tool, uses GitHub for maintaining its product timelines and release features. This is one of the tasks that we had created. And if you look at it from a user perspective, an API that would be used by an end user is where we are trying to document it. However, the team has not restricted the documentation to only the API. They're also going ahead and updating the plugins at the end plugins where this change is going to reflect. So as a technical writer, you're probably looking at what is my end user going to consume. But if you include these in your stories, you also end up updating places where your developers, your product engineers are going to benefit from. Uh, and when I say make it part of your release, this is a snapshot from a set of activities that the team does at the end of the release. This is a checklist that is supposed to ensure or is required to call a release successful. It has a section for website and docs. It has to be checked in. It has to, the release manager has to ensure that all of these criteria are met, and that's the only time that the team can go forward with the release. So putting in these contingencies, putting in these checklists can really enhance the end results that you have for your product documentation. Now that you know that these are certain stakeholders, this is where my documentation should start. These are the tasks that I must do to ensure that my product documentation is updated. The next obvious question that probably we have is what, or what should actually qualify for my product documentation, right? So in that sense, product features, all you should definitely create you should definitely structure your documentation that calls out specifically what are the product features, or the areas where your product can be useful. um, uh, Release change log. I often find this missing in a lot of good documentations that I would otherwise consider good. And a release change log is missing. Uh, with powerful cadence of releasing a month or over 6 months, it's very useful to let your end users know what has changed. And there's no better place for it than your product documentation. There are certain features which might be deprecated, and calling it out in a release change log really helps the end user who's consuming the product. Um, Principal features: what makes your product stand out? Why should a potential, if you look at this answers the question for the stakeholder of your potential users. Why should a user be on your product? So the principal features, enlisting the principal features, answers those questions for that. Product interface. In the world of in the open source world, there are a lot of products that are now directly used using APIs, and the endpoints that the product exposes aren't well documented. So which means that there are often queries that I see a lot on open source forums about how can this product be used, or what is the contract that this endpoint is trying to expose. A well-maintained API documentation or any product interface, which however way you're exposing a product, really helps in the user journey. And again, this ties back to the fact that if you foresee such kind of a stakeholder on your product, then this becomes a must for you to document. Product videos. No matter, so a product team usually has gone through the cycle and iteration of building a feature. It has gone through the cycle of understanding the needs of that feature, and what the end user gets to see is a result of that, of maybe that month or that couple of weeks of hard work that the team has put. But it's often missed as a point when that feature makes way to your product documentation. Product videos are a way of connecting those dots. It's a way of letting the user know of that journey that the particular feature has taken. It gives you more space. It gives you more um, um, uh, time to talk to your end user and explain as to what is that feature trying to do. It straight away answers a lot of your questions. Product videos are a great hit with first time users. It just makes the adoption of the product a lot easier. Examples. It's important that for specific technical products, that where if the product is supposed to or lives in an ecosystem where it has integrations. Now, if you provide examples of these integrations, or if you let people know that if you have to probably integrate these are the ways that you could do it, that is a great help. It just facilitates the user experience, enhances the user experience, and I would say that you should always include examples of how a feature can be used or what are the possible use cases for that. GIFs. I'm going to show you examples of all of these, and it's going to be clearer as to where are the places or what are the places or what are the type of products that would benefit from some of these. GIFs are nothing but an easier way to elaborate a difficult functionality, which could be a very technical or which is very user based. For example, if you are enhancing the dashboard experience for your application, often if a user comes onto the dashboard, if you've reduced the number of clicks for that user, a GIF is a great way to probably tell that end user of how that's happening, how have this user journey been altered. So that's where I think it's helpful. Screenshots, it basically makes it easier for person to understand where he is on your product, what are the areas or what are the items that can be clicked, what are the various user journeys he can go through, and that's how the screenshots would be helpful. FAQs. Again, I'm going to tie it back to the product support team. I'm going to tie it back to the stakeholders. If you keep building on the FAQs, if you can think of the personas that are going to be used for your product, and if you can answer some of these questions, some of these FAQs, it makes it makes your users independent. It makes them solve their problems on their own, reduce the lead cycle to solving their problem, and they can move on to some trying out new features. They can move on to benefiting from more niche features that your product has to offer. So that's where FAQs can really help you. So I've taken some of the examples from some of the open source products or very frequently used products in the ecosystem today. So Tycho, it's one of the libraries that ThoughtWorks has. And if you look at it, has very simply expressed its key features. If you go to the Tycho website documentation, you would see that it's calling out its salient features very clearly. And that just to me helps understand why I should probably use this, or what are the benefits that I'm going to get if I'm going to use this. Niche features. GoCDs, there are a lot of CI/CD tools in the market, and GoCD understands that one of the key features for it is the way it probably shows you your product pipelines, your deployment pipelines, the visual streams that your pipelines has possibly created, and it's showing the end user that experience. It is telling you what are the benefits that you can get from these niche features. Postman is a tool that people can use to have their APIs fired for a resource, understand what are the responses that they're getting, and it is now with the way DevOps sphere is moving. People can consume some of the Postman APIs, and if you look at it, they've explained very nicely as to how that API or various endpoints, the REST endpoints of this APIs can be used with examples, which really makes it easier for people to understand how will they get benefited, or what is it that is being expected, what is the contract that is being exposed. I'm sure most of us would have used VS Code. We might use it for writing our documentation. If you ever visit the VS Code a documentation website, it introduces you with product videos. And that just, for me, when I wanted to actually start using this, it really connected a lot with me, because I was able to quickly see of how I can get started, how I can customize, what are the way, how does the extension ecosystem work, how can I get more plugins. This is also true for one of the very famous developer tools, IntelliJ. If you go to the IntelliJ documentation website, you are greeted with one of the introductory videos that tells you about the power of the product, that tells you about the ecosphere that it's being used in, and how can you leverage that tool. So it's very interactive. It helps drive home the message that you would probably want. Examples and tutorials. As I was talking about, if your product is in a sphere where there are integrations, Gauge is again a ThoughtWorks product. And if you look at it, it works in the DevOps sphere. It talks about the various CI/CD tools that you can use it with. Each of these tools, you can see examples of how you can integrate Gauge with it. Now, when you talk about a product, these integrations are probably out of its boundaries. These are not features. However, this is an enabler for this is going one step ahead in the user journey, thinking about your stakeholders, understanding that this is how my end user is going to use my tool. And then when you put that forward as examples, it just makes the life of your product team a lot simpler, because then the how to questions are not there. They're not answering those questions on a daily basis. The documentation done once can answer those questions. I'm sure a lot of us would have used Notepad++, and I found one of the features of multi-line select very, very useful. And look at it, how this GIF is simply trying to tell you that. So while looking at it in a text editor, I have seen a lot of people wanting to select a block of code or a block of words in multi-line that they're trying to do. And with the GIF, they have easily expressed that in the product. And I think that really connected well with me and helped me understand. So these are some of the examples that I had of what are the items that you should consider, how you can enhance your product documentation, how you can connect those dots of how they can make your user journey for your various stakeholders a lot better. And these are the examples that I've come up with. The next question is, now that you know that this is where my product documentation, this is why I'm doing it, these are the stakeholders I'm doing it for, these are the questions that I'm trying to answer, that comes, where should your product documentation live? And why should you ask this question? Product documentations have a habit of becoming stale over a period of time. That is because the way or the places where they live or where they are maintained are so difficult or tedious to reach to, that you don't have active collaborations or contributions happening on the product documentation. So to remove that pain point, or to enhance, or to basically say accelerate regular contribution, it's important for you to think, who are my contributors? Is it only going to be some set of technical writers? Am I also expecting my product engineers to contribute into this? Or is my support team going to log back certain FAQs that is going to enrich my product documentation? Think about those stakeholders, think about the contributors. If it's an open source product, then you would want a lot of open source folks to come in and contribute to your product documentation. So which is the place where it should live? How can it enable frequent updates? How can you version control this documentation so that people are not shy from contributing to it, or of breaking certain set of documentations? It should also be a place where anyone who's consuming all the stakeholders who are consuming your product documentation can come back and give you feedback. It could be a small HTML form, which you could probably say, give feedback. And one of the things that you would notice, even for AWS documentations, if you visit, is they allow you to edit it on GitHub, which means that if you feel that a certain set of documentations, which is common, it's human error, it can happen, and you can allow that, you can allow your readers, your consumers to actually come back and give you feedback or help you correct that. That's a great way, I feel, of keeping your product documentations up to date, live, and useful. And you should also understand that the product documentation has a lot of stakeholders, and the only way you can build a live documentation, a documentation that's consumed and used and is useful, is if you collaborate with your stakeholders. If you allow those stakeholders to come back and collaborate, because there's only a set of user journeys, set of user questions that you can envision. I, in my experience, have always found end users coming up with great ways to restructure a certain set of documentation block, which has really helped us reach out to a larger set of users in a much easier way. And just like everything else in your agile teams, repeat. These are not just the first time questions. You might want to do this after a couple of features have been released. Think who are the stakeholders I'm trying to answer for, who are the stakeholders I'm trying to introduce this documentation to, or this certain set of features for, and probably go back and think if some of these questions that you've tried to answer are still relevant for your product. So if they are, then is your product documentation answering that? This exercise would actually help you enrich a product documentation in a way. So these are the set of questions that I would ask, and I hope this helps you when you're next time starting on a journey for a product documentation. And that's all that I have for my talk, and I'll be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Aditya. That was quite enlightening to know about your open source documentation, product documentation. Any questions? No questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
About since you are talking about open source, so when a user wants to contribute to your documentation, are there any designated people who take care of that? For example, I have done that before, and I sometimes do that even now to kind of contribute to an open source documentation. And sometimes when you contribute or when you suggest something, some products and the people that are working for the product, they are very welcoming and very prompt in interacting with you. So you would want to contribute more to that product later. But sometimes some product teams, probably they are busy and they are not as prompt in answering or interacting with you. So how do you, is there somebody, a designated person who interacts with the end users outside your organization, since it's an open source product?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good question. We have a team that's responsible, who actually checks these contributions that are coming in, validates them if they are meaningful and if they can be incorporated. So yes, to answer your question, yes, there is a designated set of people who are also the maintainers of that particular artifact, and they are the ones who interact whenever a user has submitted any sorts of recommendations, updates to the documentations that we have. In our particular case, we've not restricted it to a certain couple of users. We have a bunch of folks who currently do that. So as you've mentioned that there are times when these teams could be busy, um, and I think limiting it to a certain people would probably be an issue. But maybe have like a group of people rather um, who have the technical know-how of how where the product is being used, how is it being used, and what the product documentation is about.
Great, that's a great point. Thank you.
We have time for maybe one more question. Akshay, I see you raised your hand. Maybe you want to quickly post your question or talk about it before we move on to our next session.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Aditya, are there like the question of where should your docs live? Do you have any concrete suggestions for that? Some nice documentation tools which make it as easy for the editors to edit and version control, and are also not like boring pages of text for the user.
So we moved on to something called as a Hugo book, which is from GitHub itself. It's an open theme that GitHub explores, exposes. We most of our tech documentation lives on GitHub. We've moved to .md files, which most of your um, text editors these days would, if you're trying to edit an MD file, it would actually show you a rendition of how it's probably going to look over web. And that makes it really interactive because as you edit, you can see the output in these text editors. For example, VS Code, if you would want to edit an MD file, it does that. I see in some enterprises Confluence being used. Confluence again has an online edit mode, wherein if you have the right set of permissions, and you could probably push in a version which can be looked upon by a maintainer later and can be approved or can be rolled back to a previous version. So Confluence is another tool which in on my recent team, in fact, we're using. We used to maintain most of our documents as PowerPoint presentations over Box, and we've moved most of our documentation now to Confluence, where you can actively collaborate.
Right. And would also some of these tools be customizable if I want to add some interactive elements or something to make my docs look a little better, feel a little better for the users? So any frameworks
Yes.
or any...
Like what I said, the Markdown files, the Markdown is in HTML. It interprets it, so you can add tables, you can add GIFs, you can add videos in those MD files. All you have to do is add those resources, and you can render them on your documentations.
Okay.
Thank you. So we have no more time for Aditya's questions. So we'll move on to our next speaker for the day. And it is Raghuram. Raghuram has been working for product-based companies since 2001 under various positions of technical writing. He has immense experience in healthcare, IT, and network management domains. He is passionate about technical writing. He has started creating awareness about technical writing to college students and has mentored several junior writers. He's currently volunteering as a VP of STC India chapter and owner of Technical Writer Forum in LinkedIn with over 31.5K members. Welcome, Raghuram. It's all yours now.
Thanks, Raji, for that wonderful introduction. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks all for joining this session, and good evening and good afternoon from whichever time zone you are. And for today's session, I wanted to cover most of the obvious things you may all know, but some things may help in your daily work from home or remote working. Today I wanted to cover what is the trends in the remote working, and I wanted to mainly focus on what is the tips I can give for the technical writers in terms of planning, like project management or meetings or demos, in terms of interacting with interactive SMEs, and the whatever time you save in traveling and all those things when you're going to office. So how you can develop yourself with that saving that using that time. And finally, we'll also look at tools to transcribe, which will be helpful when you're interacting with SMEs. So right away, we'll go into the trends. And the current remote working trends is like 96% of the workers all around the world believe that they're more productive when they're working from home. And 93% of collaboration is nonverbal. That means that it is not like we have to always be in the office verbally interact with others. So all our the tools we use, like Jira and all the project management tools, it's very obvious, and it allows us to do the collaboration without verbal communication. And during this working from home, the deep workbook talks about what is the most productive time is. So if you are continuously working for 2 to 3 hours a day, you can easily come up with a maximum efficiency, and it will allow you to do that only in work from home. Unlike in office, you'll have a lot of distraction, etc. And 42% of workers have a close friend for work. So this is another disadvantage of working from home. So if you have workers, if you have friends or colleagues who are working from at the office, you may find it difficult because you cannot spend time with them or interact with them physically. But anyway, we have our virtual tools to meet them and interact with them. And what are the other trends apart from this slide is people tend to attend only meetings to which they can contribute. This especially occurs in the work from home scenario. And the flow of traffic and all the disturbance around the office also kills their productivity, and it is frustrating, and it reduces the efficiency of the workers. And Microsoft believes that the developers should have a closed door room, and uh, they should also have a door that closes automatically. So that shows that how much distraction happens in the office, and uh, so we are more productive at work from home. And also, in the recent study in Australia shows that workers are not comfortable sharing spaces with others, and that is another important trend. Uh, Sorry. And the another important thing is you in the office the interruptions control you, but at home you can control them. That is the most important thing. In office, any colleague or any of them comes and disturbs you, you cannot oblige, right? So that is another important thing. And the community question: does the human contact make difference? Worker, the human contact makes a difference, definitely, but the disturbance part is the most important thing. And worker happiness is good in work from home, but worker loneliness is bad in work from home. And what are the 5 workplace trends will shape up in after this lockdown? Because during this lockdown, many companies started allowing work from home. Unlike many companies didn't feel that the workers are productive. So many companies will open up after this lockdown. They will definitely do some analysis and see how they can allow the workers or employees to do work from home more. And the commuting will change forever because of this. And you can see that there'll be lesser traffic. And already you may see in the news that TCS and Wipro are looking at how they can offer more working from home, like not like before. And the most important thing when you're doing a working from home is you have to take care of your email etiquette, because the bad emails, or whenever you are sending a mail, and if you have misinterpreted, it may cause a very bad reputation for you, and it will not be tolerated. And though these days we are using a lot of Zoom and all these meetings tools, for online conferencing, all these tools, it will maybe these days it is hyped, and but it will get reduced, and more co-working spaces will emerge. With many people are working from home, they may move to their native, and these people may go try working in the co-living workspaces to just for a change, and that will also emerge. And lastly, we will become part of the digital nomads, where we can roam around anywhere in the world, and we'll be working anytime connected to the office. And unlike earlier, you have to be physically present in the office and report to your manager every day. So you may go for a vacation somewhere remote place, and still you will be connected to the office, but we must not even misuse that. So all these, the previous slide, the current slide, the data is from the Arcadin. You may find out from their website, arcadin.com. So we'll come to the most important part, the tips for technical writers. Yeah. So first thing is, so every day when you start your day, first plan for what you're going to achieve, and have a strong discipline to execute the same. And always discipline is the most important thing. Even though if you're not working from home also, the discipline is very important. Whenever you are starting a day, plan and execute the same, and make a list of talks for the day, and take breaks. At home, you may not have a very good setup and not ergonomic also, so take breaks. And also it also removes your block, like earlier Manasi Gandhi was talking about this technical writer's block also. So taking breaks will refresh your mind, and also during those breaks you recollect what was going on earlier and all. So always plan and execute. And in the project management part, so you'll definitely work on well, many of us will work on simultaneously several projects. So we have to prioritize those projects, and so we have to choose which meeting we have to attend, and also always check the Jira every day. And you, not only your task, you also have to keep a watch on what is coming in, what are the bugs coming in the product, and what are the new how the stories are moving on a daily basis, so that we can easily keep a pulse of what is happening in the product. And add subtasks for your main task. This is very important, and many of us miss in this regard. Whenever we add subtasks, we can easily maintain a kind of checklist, and in terms of peer review or a technical review, whatever. And always add separate tasks for the SMEs or PUs, in terms of if they have to review, or if they need to provide information also. Add a separate task for them, so that they don't miss them, and tomorrow we need not play a blame game. Because what happens is, definitely especially the product owners tend to miss these things. So always, if you had a task for them, they always have a ownership for them, and also they ensure that they pass on the information for you, or the review comments for you. And meetings or demos, yeah, you with this agile scrum methodology around, and many of us are following some other flavor of agile. So you always have to choose which are the meetings you wish to attend, because again, we are working simultaneously on several products, and each and every product has the meet, like planning meeting, sprint planning meeting, review, sprint review, and refinement and daily stand-up. So we have to choose the meetings which we wish to attend. Otherwise, we have to ask the product owners or the scrum master to record those meetings. And we have to use the screen recorder tools when you are attending this sprint review meeting, so that that is the demo which we get with without even requesting for. So we have to record those meetings. If you don't have the option to record the meeting, always use the screen recorder tools. And yeah, screen recorder tools is nothing like you have to download anything new. Like it's like, which we use for creating instructional videos like Camtasia or Adobe Premiere. And transcribe the sprint review meeting, which is showing demos. We'll be talking about later about that in the coming slides. And lastly, the most important thing, ask questions. Many of us remain silent during these meetings, and we don't ask questions. We most important thing is we have to ask questions, and we also have to provide suggestions in terms of UI UX if required, and that will definitely show our subject knowledge, and also how dedicated for we are working for the product. Yeah, interacting with SMEs. The most important thing, or the most basic thing, is we maintain rapport in general. But during this lockdown or long stretch of working from home, we have to ensure that we meet them regularly through video conferencing. Again, I am highlighting it because if we meet them video conferencing, we get a feel like we are together. And if you are not having any chance to meet them also, like not for getting information, at least go try wishing them, because this will help us building good rapport with them. And take part in the fun activities, like during this lockdown people period, the HR, or you can also volunteer to organize some fun activities. And also take initiative and teach them for information for pending reviews. Don't wait for everything to come. Like as I mentioned before, you have to create tasks for them, and also we have to chase them and get the things done. And always follow the basics, as always, for interacting with this. Prepare before going and discussing with SME, or do your homework, like just check what is there in the product, and ensure what you collect enough information what is there in the product if you have access to, and then go meet them. Yeah, so this is one of the important things we can do during this remote work, or during this lockdown also. Instead of watching the news every whole day and getting depressed with this corona and all those things, we can spend our time efficiently by learning new help authoring tools. You can install trial version. In fact, I learned Adobe FrameMaker 2019 during this lockdown period, and also basics of data. So you can utilize the time efficiently, like whatever you wasted during by traveling, and all the lunch breaks, whatever breaks. So almost you would have spent 10 hours, 10 to 11 hours a day going and coming to office. So you will easily save at least 1 to 2 hours a day. So you can utilize the time to learn new things, like new help authoring tools, and also you can learn new technologies or build skills using the online learning sites like Linda Learning in LinkedIn, or udemy.com. And lastly, you can innovate or improvise during this lockdown. Whenever we have less disturbance from the like in a typical office scenario, when you're working in the office, you will have a lot of disturbance, and you may not even get a good environment for creativity. But in case of working from home, it will be like more silent comparatively, and you can spend some time and look for scenarios where you can automate in your documentation workflow, like in terms of review process, or even terms of publishing too. And yeah, so investigate and look for areas to improve in the DDLC also, in case if you're working with multiple writers, how you can improve the process so that you can get the things done smoothly. And lastly, you can learn scripting tools like Python, or you can even do some Windows macro use, that is something like Visual Basic or Visual Studio. So you can do those things and implement them for automation in your workplace. Yeah, tools to transcribe. Uh, I had a video for this, so in the interest of time, I will not uh, like play this video for now. I will share you the link. You can check it out. So there's this Otor.ai plugin for Zoom, which will transcribe in the sense like uh, on the go. It will create the text of whatever is spoken on over the meeting, Zoom meeting, and you can use that information, and you may copy edit the information what is demoed for the product or whatever, so that it'll help you easily retrieve information whatever provided by the SMEs of the on the product. Okay, I'll go to the next slide. Sorry. Yeah, so there's another Google Live transcribe tool you can use, but this works with mobile, as a mobile app. It's an Android app, and this you can use maybe when you are interacting with SMEs physically, or also you can play the recordings and let the Google Live transcribe. And I've also embedded the video here. You can have a look at it later. Yeah, so this is my last slide. And yeah, so lockdown has changed the way how we work daily, like for people who have not worked from home for a long time like me. It has changed how we work. And if opportunity doesn't knock you, build a door, that is, have your home as an office, and go start with freelancing. That's what I meant. Yeah, so these are the references, like these are the videos I was talking about. I have given the links. You can check it out later also, in case if you cannot access the video embedded. Yeah, that's all I have. You have any questions?
Any questions, anybody? No questions? I guess it's a Friday evening, so Raghuram, everybody is wound up much earlier than you wanted. Thank you for that insightful talk about remote working. Yeah, I'm sorry. Did someone have a question?
Yeah. Shankar here, Raghuram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have been reading articles on various websites regarding the changing trends in work. That is, I mean, remote working would be the latest trend in the IT and other sectors.
Yeah.
So the problem with technical writers, I mean, we would have some issues in getting the inputs because, as you know, right? So at office, as you said, okay, we can talk to them casually. I mean, the developers or QA, whoever. But if we work, I mean, if we work remotely for a longer periods of time, how are we going to get the inputs on time? Because everyone would be busy with their own work, especially when working remotely. I think there will be more productivity because they can save time in commuting, they can save time in taking breaks. So how do you address this? Like,
Yeah, as you mentioned, Shankar, there is the productivity increases, so the developers will get more time, I guess. So they'll be ready to help you, and so how we approach them. So that is the main thing. So always we have to keep the task for them on the Jira board, or keep on. We should keep pushing them for the information, or we have to push them for the review comments. But what happened in my experiences, like during this lockdown, I felt the developers were giving more information in time compared to the earlier scenario. That is what I feel. But only the challenges I had is like accessing the environment. Like sometimes the internet goes, bandwidth goes down, and accessing the environment will be very difficult. So we may have some limited time with the accessing the environment. So those are the only challenges I face compared to getting information from SMEs.
Yeah, true. I understand regarding the bandwidth. I also had the same issue.
Yeah.
And when you said more time working productively, they will get more work. Developers are curious. Yeah, I mean, you will be always willing to help. When they get more time, they will get more work. Yeah, thanks, Raghuram. Thanks for the inputs. It was good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, lastly, I wanted to thank Raj Kavita for hosting this and giving me a chance to present today.
WriteTheDocs India, Raji and Lubaina, the organizers of it, are very grateful and thankful to all the speakers, Manasi, Aditya, and Raghuram, for sharing their experience. And I'm sure all of us learned from everything that they shared with us. It would be great if more of you would like to come forward, talk about it, share your experiences, and keep this community alive. You know where the details are to fill in the details for your presentation. It's on the meetup page. Thank you all for taking out time and joining us. See you all, hopefully, next meetup.
Thank you all.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
all.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Look forward to
Thank
meet
you
you all.
all.
Bye.